In the endless golden plains of the African savanna, survival has only one rule: the strong devour the weak. Hyenas and lions have been enemies since the dawn of time, locked in a rivalry written in blood and instinct. But one scorching afternoon, something happened that would defy everything nature had taught us. It began when a pack of hyenas surrounded a helpless lion cub, tiny, trembling, and alone. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes even the wind hold its breath. And then one of the hyenas broke the circle. She was larger than the others, scarred from past battles, with eyes that carried both pain and defiance. Her name was Shira. She stepped between the cub and her packmates, not to finish the kill, but to stop it. Her growl wasn't of hunger, but of warning. The other hyenas froze, confused, snarling in disbelief. Never in all their lives had they seen one of their own protect the enemy. In that moment, the savannah shifted. A predator had chosen compassion over instinct, and what followed would change everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more powerful and emotional true-life stories like this one. Tales that remind us that kindness and courage can exist even in the wildest hearts. Because what Shira did next, and how the lions reacted when they discovered what had happened, will touch your soul in ways you'll never forget. The morning sun had barely risen when the dry air of the savannah trembled with tension. The hyena clan was on the move. Dust rose around their feet, carried by the scent of power, hunger, and hierarchy. Shira, an older female with a torn ear and eyes the color of copper, led the way. Her body bore the scars of a lifetime spent fighting for food, for dominance, for survival. She had learned the ways of her kind early. Loyalty to the clan meant life, hesitation meant death. But that morning something felt different. The night before, a storm had rolled through the plains, tearing branches from the acacia trees and scattering debris across the grasslands. Shira had spent the early dawn hours tracking the scent of wet earth and fresh carrion. The pack was restless. Food was scarce. Then came the sound, faint, high-pitched and desperate. It didn't belong to the hyenas. It was the sound of something young, something lost. Shira froze mid-step. Her ears twitched. Behind her, the pack's dominant female, Nareka, growled impatiently. "What is it?" she demanded. Shira didn't answer. She moved toward the noise, her paws sinking into the damp soil, her nose guiding her. The cry came again, a sharp whimper. The rest of the clan followed, sniffing the air eagerly, sensing opportunity. They emerged into a small clearing near a dried-up watering hole. There, beneath a fallen log, a tiny lion cub struggled weakly to free itself from the mud. Its fur was golden but streaked with grime, its sides heaving with exhaustion. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. The pack erupted into snarls and laughter-like calls. "A lion cub," one of the younger males cackled. "Left behind." Narika's lips curled into a grin. "Nature's justice, after what their pride did to us last season." Shira stood motionless, her muscles tense. The cub turned its head toward the sound of their voices, its eyes wide with terror. It gave a pitiful mewl that made the others laugh harder. "End it," Nareka ordered, stepping forward. "No mercy for lion blood." The youngest hyenas surged ahead, eager to impress their leader. But Shira didn't move. Something inside her, something old and buried, stirred. She'd seen lion cubs before, but this one was different, its eyes. They reminded her of her own lost offspring, the pups she'd buried years ago when a flood had swept through their den. She'd never forgiven herself for not saving them. Now, staring at the trembling cub, she felt that same ache return, fierce and unbearable. As the first hyena lunged, Shira reacted without thinking. She moved fast, planting herself between the cub and her packmate. The impact sent up a cloud of dust. The others froze in shock. "Shira," Nareka barked, "what are you doing?" Shira growled low, her body rigid. "It's just a baby." "That baby will grow teeth," Nareka snapped. "It'll grow claws, and one day it'll tear our young apart. You know what lions are?" But Shira didn't move. The cub whimpered again, pressing against her leg, seeking shelter in the shadow of the very creature meant to kill it. Nareka's eyes narrowed. "You've gone soft," she hissed. The pack spread out in a semicircle, tension thick in the air. Every instinct screamed at Shira to back down. She was outnumbered, and challenging the leader could mean death. But her heart refused to yield. "I've spilled enough blood," she said quietly. "Not this one." "Then you've chosen your fate," Nareka snarled. The first attack came fast, a blur of fur and teeth. Shira dodged, swiping her paw across the attacker's muzzle. Blood sprayed across the dirt. The others hesitated, stunned by her defiance. But Nareka roared in rage, charging straight at her. The two females collided with bone-crushing force, rolling through the dust, biting and clawing. Shira's old wounds burned with pain, but she fought with the strength of something greater than survival. Behind her, the cub cried out, trapped between the fight and the flames of instinct. Finally, Shira managed to throw Nareka off balance, her jaws snapping dangerously close to the leader's throat. For a second, their eyes locked, predator against predator, sisters in cruelty, and then Shira let go, stepping back. "This isn't your kill," she said, panting, "and it's not mine either." Nareka rose slowly, blood dripping from her lip. "Then leave," she spat, "but don't come back." The pack parted, muttering and snarling as Shira backed away. She could feel their eyes burning into her, judging her weakness. When she turned, the cub was still there, trembling. She nudged it gently with her muzzle. "Come," she whispered. "If you stay, they'll finish what they started." The cub hesitated but followed, stumbling through the grass on unsteady legs. Shira led it away from the clearing, away from the pack that had been her family for years. The sun was high now, and the heat pressed down hard. Her body ached, and every breath tasted like dust. But she didn't stop. They reached a rocky ridge by noon, where the air was cooler. The cub collapsed beneath a bush, too weak to move. Shira sat beside it, licking the mud from its fur. The gesture felt strange, almost forbidden, like touching something sacred. The cub blinked up at her, its tiny chest rising and falling. For the first time in her life, Shira saw no enemy, no prey, only a life that deserved to keep breathing. As the shadows lengthened across the savannah, she lifted her head and listened. In the distance, the hyena clan's laughter echoed faintly, fading into the wind. She was alone now, cast out, branded a traitor. But as the cub pressed closer to her side, letting out a soft sigh, Shira knew she'd made the right choice. For the first time in years, her heart felt whole. And somewhere far away, the lions. Pride would soon realize that one of their own still lived, because a hyena had done the unthinkable. But when they found out who had saved him, the savannah would tremble again, because no one, not even Shira, could predict what the lions would do next. The sun dipped low over the savannah, turning the tall grass into an ocean of gold. Shira moved cautiously through it, her every sense alert. The cub stumbled after her, mewling softly. He was still too weak to walk properly, his tiny paws catching on roots and stones. The storm had left him malnourished and exhausted, and now, every mile away from her pack was a mile closer to danger. For the first time in her life, Shira wasn't the hunter, she was the protector. And that terrified her more than any fight ever had. As night began to fall, the air cooled and the world filled with sounds. The distant laughter of her old clan, the haunting cries of jackals, the rhythmic drumming of insects. Somewhere far off, a lion roared, deep and commanding, shaking the ground beneath her paws. The cub froze, his ears flattened. "That sound belongs to your kind," Shira murmured softly, glancing down at him. "Don't be afraid," he whimpered again, pressing against her leg for warmth. His small body trembled under her shadow, but she could feel his heartbeat, fragile but steady. They found shelter near a group of fallen trees, where lightning had struck weeks earlier. The bark was blackened, but beneath it a hollow was large enough for them both. Shira circled once before lying down. The cub hesitated before curling beside her belly, sighing as he finally drifted into sleep. She watched him in the moonlight. Every feature of his tiny face, the golden fur, the faint whiskers, the small twitch of his ears, reminded her of the lives she'd lost long ago. The memory returned sharp and cruel. The storm that had destroyed her den, her own cubs crying as water rushed in, her powerless body held down by mud. She had failed them once. She would not fail again. That night, Shira didn't sleep. Every rustle of grass made her ears twitch. Every faint sound in the darkness sent her muscles tightening. She wasn't guarding herself anymore. She was guarding him. By dawn, her strength had begun to fade. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the hunger gnawed at her stomach like fire. But the cub needed her more than she needed food. When he woke, she nudged him gently toward a shallow puddle where rainwater had gathered. He drank eagerly, splashing his nose into the mud, and she couldn't help but let out a small, breathy laugh, a sound she hadn't made in years. "You're clumsy," she said softly, "but brave. You'll need that." They traveled again as the heat of day rose. The cub trotted beside her now, stumbling less, his spirit growing stronger with every step. But the savannah was merciless, and danger was never far. By noon, they reached a watering hole, small but deep. Shira crouched low behind a bush, scanning the area. Crocodiles lurked near the edge, and a small herd of wildebeest stood watching from the opposite side. No lions, no hyenas. It seemed safe. She approached cautiously, lowering her head to drink. The cub followed, his reflection shimmering beside hers. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Then came the smell, faint but unmistakable. Lions! Shira's head shot up. The cub froze, instinctively backing closer to her leg. A low growl echoed across the water. On the far side of the pond, emerging from the tall grass, came 2 lionesses. Their eyes locked on Shira immediately. And then, as one of them caught sight of the cub, their expressions changed from curiosity to fury. Shira's heart pounded. The larger lioness stepped forward, her mane brushing the wind. "What is this?" she growled, voice deep and threatening. "A hyena with a lion cub? You dare steal one of ours?" Shira backed up slowly. "He wasn't stolen," she said lowly, though she knew they couldn't understand her words. Her stance said it all. She was defending, not attacking. The cub whimpered again. The lionesses moved closer, muscles rippling, eyes narrowed in disbelief. One of them barked a sharp command to the other. They were going to take him. Shira planted her feet in the dirt, a low snarl rising from her chest. The cub pressed himself against her side, confused but trusting. The tension in the air was unbearable. The first lioness lunged. Shira dodged, narrowly avoiding the swipe of a massive paw. She didn't fight back. She couldn't. If she attacked, the cub would be caught in the chaos. The second lioness moved around, circling to block her escape. Shira growled, glancing between them. She knew she couldn't win, not against 2 full-grown lions. But she had no intention of surrendering. Then unexpectedly the cub cried out. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. From beyond the ridge came another roar, louder, deeper, commanding silence across the plain. The lionesses froze mid-attack. Shira turned. A massive male lion stood at the top of the hill, his golden mane shining in the sunlight. His amber eyes locked on the cub. The expression that passed across his face was unmistakable. Shock, then relief, then fury. The lionesses stepped back, bowing their heads slightly. Shira took a step forward, keeping herself between the cub and the newcomers. She could feel the cub trembling behind her leg. The male approached slowly, his massive paws silent against the earth. When he stopped a few feet away, the wind shifted, and his scent hit her. Pride leader, father, king. The cub whimpered again, and the lion's expression softened. He looked at Shira, his nostrils flaring as if trying to understand. Why would a hyena, his sworn enemy, protect his child? The answer lived in her eyes. They stared at each other for what felt like eternity. Then slowly, Shira stepped aside. The cub hesitated, looking back at her. "Go," she whispered softly. The little lion walked forward on unsteady legs and pressed his head into his father's chest. The great lion let out a low, rumbling sound, part growl, part purr, before turning his gaze back to Shira. There was no hatred there anymore, only something close to respect. He gave a short, low grunt, an acknowledgement, before turning and leading his pride away. The cub looked back once, his small face framed by the dust and sunlight, and then he was gone. Shira stood alone by the waterhole, her reflection shimmering beside her in the heat. She felt the weight of silence settle around her like a cloak. The cub was safe. That was enough. She turned toward the setting sun, her body aching, her spirit tired, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. That night the savannah laughed, the sound of her kin echoing across the plains. But for once, Shira didn't join them. She had learned that there were things greater than loyalty, stronger than blood. And somewhere a lion cub would grow up, knowing that once his life had been spared by a hyena who broke the rules of nature, and in doing so, changed it forever. The night after Shira returned to the open plains, the wind carried no laughter. The sky stretched wide and silent, the stars cold and sharp above her. The world had changed, or maybe she had. She had defied the oldest law of the savannah. The enemy must never be spared. She didn't regret it, but she knew what would come. By dawn, the sounds of the hyena clan carried across the wind. Shira froze where she stood among the tall grass. Her nose caught their scent long before she saw them. They were moving fast, the rhythm of a hunt. But this wasn't the sound of chasing prey. It was the sound of chasing her. She knew Nareka would come. The leader couldn't allow what Shira had done to go unanswered. Mercy in the eyes of the clan was weakness, and weakness killed more hyenas than hunger. Shira started walking, her pace steady but calm. She didn't run. Running would only mark her as prey. The savannah stretched before her like a vast, endless mirror of heat. She passed a herd of wildebeest grazing near the river, their heads lifting warily as she moved by. They didn't know she was no threat tonight, only a creature searching for peace. When the first bark echoed behind her, she stopped. "Shira!" The voice carried like thunder. "You've shamed us all." It was Nareka. The rest of the clan emerged from the grass, a dozen shapes, lean and wild-eyed, circling her. Their laughter was high-pitched and cruel. Shira stood tall, her posture proud, but her muscles trembled from exhaustion. Nareka stepped forward, her fur bristling. "You betrayed your kind for a lion cub," she spat. "You protected what we destroy. You fed compassion where only hunger should live." Shira's voice was low, but steady. "I protected life. That cub never harmed us. He was alone." "Alone?" Nareka snarled. "And what of the lions who took our prey, our dens, our land? You think that cub wouldn't grow to do the same? You think it matters?" Shira's eyes glinted in the morning light. "I think we can be more than what they expect of us." A wave of murmurs rippled through the pack. Some looked uncertain, others sneered. Nareka saw it too, doubt. Her dominance depended on fear, and Shira's defiance threatened to unravel it. "You've lost your place," Nareka growled. "And soon you'll lose your life." She lunged. The impact was bone against bone, strength against memory. Shira fought back with the ferocity of her younger years, her teeth sinking into Nareka's shoulder before being thrown back into the dirt. Dust filled the air as the others circled closer, eager to witness blood. Nareka attacked again, this time faster. Shira dodged, her breath ragged, her paws slipping on the dry soil. She could feel the years in her bones now, every wound, every sleepless night, every scar earned for survival. "Fight me!" Nareka roared. "I am," Shira gasped, striking back. "But not for me, for something better." The two collided once more, their snarls echoing across the plains. Nareka's jaw clamped around Shira's neck, forcing her down. The pain was blinding, but just as the leader prepared the killing bite, a sound split the air, a deep, powerful roar. Every hyena froze. The lions had come. From the ridge to the east, a pride appeared, led by the same golden-maned male who had taken his cub back. His mane burned like fire in the sun. Behind him were lionesses, moving in silent formation. Shira's heart stilled. The cub was there too, larger now, still young but strong enough to walk among them. He was watching. The pride advanced, slow and deliberate, their presence commanding. The hyenas backed away instinctively. Even Nareka hesitated. "Retreat!" one of the males hissed. But Narika's pride burned brighter than her fear. "No, we finish this now!" She turned toward Shira again, eyes wild. "See what your mercy brought us? You invited death." Shira struggled to her feet, blood running down her leg. "No," she rasped. "I brought truth." Nareka lunged one final time, but before she could reach Shira, the lion's roar thundered again, closer this time. The lions charged. Chaos erupted. Hyenas scattered in every direction, barking and yelping as the lions closed in. Dust and blood filled the air. Nareka turned to fight, slashing at one of the lionesses, but she was no match for their strength. Within seconds she was forced to flee, limping into the grass, with her pride shattered. Shira stood motionless as the pride stopped in front of her. The male lion approached slowly, his massive paws silent on the ground. The cub stepped forward from between the lionesses. He was taller now, confident but cautious. When his golden eyes met Shira's, something wordless passed between them. Recognition, maybe gratitude. The great lion lowered his head slightly, a gesture Shira had never seen before. It wasn't submission. It was acknowledgement, respect. Shira's body trembled both from exhaustion and disbelief. The savannah, so often divided by hatred, stood still. No growls, no blood, only silence. The lion turned, nudging his cub gently before leading his pride away. The young one glanced back once, his tail flicking in the air like a farewell. Then they were gone, swallowed by the grass and light. When the dust settled, Shira was alone. The rest of her clan had vanished into the plains, scattered by fear and shame. The air smelled of smoke and dry earth. She limped to the edge of the ridge and looked out across the savannah, endless, golden, alive. She knew she could never go back to her kind, but that no longer mattered. For the first time in her life, she had done something that made the world pause, something that would ripple through generations of lions and hyenas alike. That evening, when the first stars pierced the sky, Shira lay down beneath a baobab tree. Her wounds ached, but her heart was calm. The wind brushed through her fur like a whisper, carrying the distant laughter of her kin and the faint roar of lions far away. Two sounds that had never belonged together, until now. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the rhythm of the plains pulsing all around her. Mercy had its price, but she had paid it willingly. Because in saving one cub, Shira had done what no beast before her had dared. She had proven that even in a world ruled by claws and teeth, compassion could roar louder than fear. And somewhere beyond the grass and the night, a young lion lifted his head to the stars and cried into the darkness, not in anger, not in hunger, but in honor of the hyena who had once saved his life. Seasons passed. The savannah changed its colors, from the wet greens of rebirth to the harsh yellows of drought. Herds migrated, and rivers dried, then swelled again when the rains returned. But one thing remained constant: the story. The tale of a lone hyena who saved a lion cub from her own kind began to travel like the wind, whispered through the plains. It moved with the rhythm of hooves and wings, told by scavengers and sung by night birds. No one knew her name anymore. To some she was a ghost, to others a spirit of balance. But to those who had seen it with their own eyes, lions and hyenas alike, Shira's act had become legend. Shira herself had grown older. The once fierce fire in her muscles had softened into a steady, quiet strength. She lived alone now, far from the territories of the packs, near a watering hole guarded by nothing but silence and sky. Her coat had faded, her pace slower, but her eyes still burned bright, copper and alive. Some nights she would lie beneath the acacia trees, listening to the laughter of hyenas echo in the distance. It no longer filled her with anger or longing. She had made peace with her solitude. She knew that what she had done had changed something, not just in her, but in the balance of the land itself. One evening, as the crimson sunset bled into the horizon, Shira limped down to the water to drink. Her reflection rippled gently in the surface, an old warrior, scarred but dignified. The wind carried the scent of wildebeest and dust, but also something else, something familiar. Lions. Her heart tensed for an instant, old instincts twitching awake. But the scent was not of a hunting pride. It was faintly floral, softened by youth. She turned her head toward the hills, where the grasses bent in slow waves. A shape appeared. Then another. A lion approached, larger than most, his mane the color of the setting sun. He moved with slow confidence, not as a predator stalking prey, but as one walking toward something sacred. Behind him, at a respectful distance, came two lionesses. Shira froze. Her heart stumbled against her ribs. She knew those eyes. It was him. The cub, no, not a cub anymore. A full-grown lion, powerful and majestic, with a calmness that reminded her of the first time she had seen his father. He stopped several feet away, lowering his head slightly, his mane catching the last rays of dying light. For a moment, the world was still. The air between them carried only memory. Shira didn't move. Her throat tightened. She expected hostility, a roar, a challenge. Instead, the lion crouched slightly, lowering his massive body to the ground in a gesture she never expected to see from a king of the plains. Respect. He looked directly into her eyes, and in that gaze she saw not dominance, not fear, but gratitude. The lionesses behind him exchanged wary glances, unsure of what their leader was doing. But when he chuffed softly, a low, breathy sound of reassurance, they relaxed and sat down in the grass. Shira tilted her head. "You remember me," she whispered, though no one could hear the words. The lion blinked slowly, and then, in a motion so gentle it seemed impossible, he stepped closer. Shira tensed, but he stopped just short of her reach. His great head bowed low once more, almost touching the earth. Shira stood still, watching, her mind swirling with disbelief. No lion had ever bowed to a hyena. Then he did something that nearly made her heart stop. He growled, softly, rhythmically, 3 short pulses. It was a call she remembered. The same call the cub had made years ago when she had shielded him from her pack. The same sound that had bound their fates together. He remembered. Her breath trembled. She took a cautious step forward, lowering her own head until they were face to face. The scent of him filled her nose. Earth, sun, and rain. He was a creature of strength, yet his eyes carried the same innocence that had once saved him. When he turned his head slightly, she saw the faint scar on his shoulder, a small mark barely visible, but enough to tell her he had not lived an easy life. The lion's gaze softened. He leaned closer and let out a low rumble that sounded almost like a purr. And then, as if the world itself was watching, he pressed his forehead gently against hers. The touch lasted only a few seconds, but it carried the weight of generations, predator and scavenger, enemies since time began. United in silent understanding, when he stepped back, Shira didn't follow. She simply stood there watching as he turned toward the hills, his pride moving behind him in graceful formation. But before he disappeared into the tall grass, he stopped and looked back one last time. Their eyes met again, across distance, across history. Then he roared, not in anger, but in tribute. The sound rolled across the savannah, deep and powerful, echoing through the canyons and trees. It wasn't the roar of dominance. It was a song, a declaration that the old hatred between lions and hyenas had been broken, even if only by 2 souls brave enough to defy it. When silence returned, Shira felt her legs weaken. She lay down beside the watering hole, her breath slow but peaceful. The sun had vanished, leaving the first stars glimmering above. The air was cool, calm, forgiving. She knew she would not see another season. Her body had grown weary, her steps heavier each day. But she didn't fear the end. She had done something no other hyena had dared to dream. She had changed the story of her kind, and so, under the silver moonlight, she closed her eyes. her chest rising and falling one last time. In the morning, the herders who passed by found her lying still beside the water, her body untouched, as if the savannah itself had chosen to protect her in death. Not far away, fresh lion tracks circled her resting place, and from the distance came the echo of a lion's call, a mournful, beautiful sound that carried across the wind. The tale would spread again of a hyena who saved a lion, and a lion who remembered. A story not of enemies, but of courage, loyalty, and the kind of love that defies the laws of nature, because sometimes the most powerful bonds are not written in blood, but in forgiveness. And from that day forward, the lions of that region would never kill a hyena that bore a torn ear, out of respect for the one who had once taught even kings the meaning of mercy. Morning came soft and quiet over the savannah, bathing the tall grass in pale gold. The air smelled of dew and dust, of life renewing itself in the wake of loss. Shira's body lay by the water's edge, still and peaceful, her fur stirring slightly with the breeze, as if the plains themselves refused to let her go completely. When the first herd of impalas passed, they didn't startle. The wind carried a strange calm around her, the kind that belongs to something sacred. Even the vultures circled once and drifted away. It was as though the wild itself understood. This was not prey. This was memory. By noon, her resting place had become a part of the land. The river whispered near her paws, and the acacia leaves above trembled gently in the sunlight. But far beyond the river, across miles of open grassland, the young lion, now king of his pride, lifted his head at the same moment the wind shifted. He felt it before he knew it. Something in the world had gone still. The air carried her scent, faint, old, familiar. His ears twitched as the memory struck him. A storm, the warmth of another creature's body shielding him. The sound of her heartbeat steady against his ear. Shira. He rose immediately, muscles rippling under his mane, and began to walk. The lionesses followed without question. They knew that look, the quiet, focused grief of a leader retracing the path of his past. Hours later, the king arrived at the watering hole where she had taken her final breath. The sun hung low, turning the sky into a sea of red and orange. He stopped several paces away, his tail swaying slowly behind him. There she was, still yet alive in memory. He stepped closer, lowering his massive frame until his head nearly touched the ground. The lionesses lingered behind him, their eyes wide, their expressions caught between awe and confusion. He inhaled deeply. Her scent was fading, but her presence remained strong. She had been the enemy once, a hyena, one of the scavengers his ancestors had hunted without mercy. But she had done what no lion had ever seen. She had risked her life for him, and in doing so, she had rewritten what it meant to be wild. The king pressed his paw gently into the dirt beside her. Then, lifting his head, he let out a low, resonant sound that rolled across the plains like thunder. Not a roar, but a call of mourning. It echoed, deep and raw, until even the distant herds paused to listen. The lionesses joined him one by one, their voices blending into a chorus that vibrated through the air. Together, they sang for the creature who had saved their king, for the hyena who had defied nature and found grace beyond instinct. When the sound faded, the king turned toward the horizon and saw something moving in the distance. A group of hyenas, cautious and uncertain, stood at the edge of the plain. Their eyes reflected the dying sunlight, wary, conflicted, but drawn by something they didn't fully understand. Among them was a young female, her fur still speckled, her gaze sharp and curious. She stepped forward a few feet, her nose twitching at the scent of both death and peace. For a long, tense moment, lions and hyenas faced each other in silence. Two species divided by generations of hatred, standing united by the memory of one who had dared to bridge that divide. The young hyena tilted her head, then did something her elders had never taught her. She sat down. The lions didn't move. The king watched her carefully, his amber eyes thoughtful. Then slowly he lowered himself to the ground in return. The two sides breathed the same air, the same grief, the same understanding. No one spoke. There were no words for what this was, only the rhythm of wind, the quiet of dusk, and the heartbeat of the savannah continuing on. When darkness fell, the lions departed quietly. But before he left, the king turned back once more. He gazed at Shira's resting place, and then toward the hyenas in the distance. He roared once, strong, powerful, eternal, not as a threat, as a promise. From that night on, the savannah changed. The old stories whispered by firelight began to take new shape. The elders spoke of a grey ghost, a hyena with eyes like bronze and a heart like gold. They said her spirit still walked under the moonlight, guiding lost cubs back to their mothers, keeping balance where chaos once reigned. And in the decades that followed, an unspoken rule spread through the plains. When lions and hyenas met near that watering hole, neither attacked. They would drink in silence side by side, each remembering the one who had broken the cycle of hatred with a single act of mercy. Years later, explorers passing through the region noticed something remarkable. Around the base of a large acacia tree near the water, bones lay arranged in patterns, not torn apart, not scattered, but almost reverently placed. The bones of both lions and hyenas resting together. No one knew who arranged them. The locals said it was the wind. The old rangers said it was something greater, the land remembering what it owed to a creature that had shown it compassion. And on certain nights, when the moon hung heavy and the wind blew low, some swore they could still hear two voices calling across the plains, one deep and majestic, the other sharp and laughing. Not as enemies, but as friends. The sound would roll over the savannah, weaving between trees, carried through the grass until it disappeared into the stars. The legend of Shira became a song, not written, not sung by humans, but carried in the memory of beasts. The song of a hyena who saved a lion, a reminder that courage isn't always found in dominance or strength, but in kindness, the quiet kind that costs you everything, yet changes the world forever. And so, long after her footprints faded and her bones turned to dust, Shira lived on, in every cub who dared to trust the unknown, in every lion who hesitated before striking, and in every heartbeat of the savannah that remembered her story. Because some souls, no matter their shape or their scars, are too wild, too brave, and too full of love to ever be forgotten. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and help us keep alive the stories that remind us that even in the wild, compassion can roar louder than fear.